So, good evening, all of you. Uh, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
So, hopefully, this will be my last class in on integral. Let's see. Okay. So, in this chapter, we are going to start with some properties of definite integrals. In the next step, we are going to discuss some applications, mainly relating to consumers and producer surplus. And then we are going to discuss the concept of improper integrals. So, when we are defining the properties, we are considering definite integrals, but we will just refer to it as integrals for short. Okay. So the first property is that we have a zone from interval from A to C, and we have divided this into two sub intervals using a point B. So A to B comprises one interval and B to C is another. So uh, this entire area, if you want to find it out, it can be expressed as A to B plus B to C. I mean, it's obvious, but still the proof, A to B means, wait a minute. Yeah, A to B means f of capital F of B minus capital F of A, and the integral from B to C means C minus B. So the B cancels out and we have simply FC minus FA. Okay. So I'll send a slide, so don't focus too much on writing. Okay. The next property is that we have integral from A to A. Okay. So this means this can be written, this is identical to limit C tends to A to C. So the proof again is that if you look at A to A, then this is obviously FA minus FA, which is equal to 0. Now, if you take the limit C tends to A, okay, so the integral is from A to C and C tends to A. Then we can write this as limit C tends to A, FC minus FA. So we take out the limit, we are just writing this portion. Sorry, just a minute. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I don't know what driver it is, or maybe it is installed. I'll just give it a second. Yeah, great. Okay. So I'll run over this proof again. Okay, so in this case, the subinterval, if this is a function, we are just taking one point. So in the previous case, it was this interval. Now we are just taking one point. So the integral will be from a to a. Okay, so we can write this as we have another interval c, and but c approaches a, and we take the limiting case when c is equal to a. So we just let's see if I can prove this. Our faith intervenes again. Okay, so I'm taking this part, and this we can write this as fc minus fa, and this is equal to limit c tends to a. So from this tends to a, we can write this as equal to 0. So we show that this is equal to 0, and therefore since these are identical, we are just writing this will therefore also be 0. Okay. Now the next part is, so far what we have done is we have taken a function and found out the area between the function and the x-axis. Now we reverse the sign. So the function is in the fourth quadrant. And now we are finding out the area under the curve. It's not under the curve actually. It is above the curve, but between the x-axis, and the curve. Now it is above the curve because it is going through the fourth quadrant. So in that case, we have A over here and C. In that case, this integral will be simply the negative of this integral. So it will be a negative value. If we just ignore the sign and find out the area under this curve, we just have to put a minus sign before this. Okay. So again the proof, a to c fx dx, this is equal to fc minus fa. So we can reverse this and write minus fa minus fc, which simply means this minus is there, c minus a. Okay. Okay. So this is important because we know that in case of investment, for instance, just a minute. Okay. Like suppose we have a case when the capital is, let us say 100, and we have depreciation which is 50, and there's no investment. net investment. Okay, so in that case, we can say that investment is minus 50. This is the depreciation. Okay, we'll come to this application later. So I'm not going to go too much into this, but such cases are important because the investment, the change in stock in a particular period can also be negative. Okay. Sorry. Over here, this f is an extra. Okay. So far we have been treating this integral as the area beneath the curve fx. Like this. We have got AC and we are finding out this area. But if the function is negatively valued in the interval, then this integral fx from a to c refers to the area above the curve. As you can see, this is above the curve and below the x-axis. It is between the function and the curve and the x-axis. And any area beneath the x-axis is then measured as a negative value. So for instance, this is an example. The function is, the derivative is minus 2x minus 1, and if we integrate this, it will become x square minus x. We are taking 0 to 2. Okay, so if you put 0 to 2, 2 is minus 4 minus x is again 2. And here we put 0, so everything becomes 0. So it is minus 6. Okay. Okay. Now, if a function is negatively valued in the interval a to c, when c is greater than a, then the integral from a to c is less than 0, that is negative. So this is the area under the curve. We just have to put a minus over this. Okay. Now as an economic application of this property, we consider the case of a firm and how it invests from a period A to C. So suppose there's positive net investment during sub-intervals and negative net investment in others. Negative net investment means that the depreciation is, we have depreciation and this is not covered by your investment. So suppose the depreciation is 50 and the investment that you make is 10. So that means capital stock will go down by 40. Okay. So we can see that net investment is minus 40. Gross investment minus depreciation. Okay. So if you look at the firm, the period starts from A and it ends at C. So from A to B1, the firm makes a net investment. So that means if we just assume that the capital stock depreciates at 50 in all periods, during this period, it makes an investment which is greater than 50. So the capital stock is augmented. But from B1 to B2, in this range, depreciation is greater than the investment. So the firm invests varying amounts 10, 20, 30, 40, whatever, but it is less than the investment. So the capital stock declines. So we can see that the investment, net investment, changes in a oscillatory manner. In the first part, in this period, it is positive, then it is negative, then it is positive, negative, again positive. So if this area is A1, A2, A3, we have A1 is positive, A2 is negative, A3 is again positive, A4 is again negative, and A5 positive. So this is the net investment. over the period. And if you want to write it in an integral form, a to c integral of it dt, this is integral of I into dt. So the integral is from a to b1, this period where it is positive. This is the second period where it is negative, b1 to b2. So this will come out to be negative. This is the third period where you can see it is again positive. This is the fourth period which is negative, and again we have the positive net investment. Okay. Okay. So next we come to producer surplus. See, often what we want to do is find out the change in the producer surplus or consumer surplus. Okay, so initially let us suppose that we have price of P star and the consumer is purchasing Q star amount. Okay, so in this case, the consumer surplus is this triangle. Okay, now suppose the price changes. The consumer reduces his consumption in response to the price change, and we can see that the surplus now falls. It is this area. Okay. So if we label this, initially the consumer surplus was ABC, and now the consumer surplus is ADE. And the change in consumer surplus is given by ADE, which is equal to now. Why is this BCED important? It is a measure of how the welfare level changes in response to the price change. Okay. So often we are interested, we take an action, we impose a tax, for instance, and as a result of this tax, the price goes up. So we want to find out that, okay, the price has gone up, but how much has the welfare gone down? And then we can compare this with how we spend the tax and see how welfare has gone up. And if we compare the two welfares, we can say that, okay, that tax hike is justified, or it does not have the desired effect, it should be withdrawn or something like that. Okay. So the consumer surplus is very important if you want to find out what happens to welfare. So here again we assume that the price goes up even further, and we can see that the surplus has gone down even more. Okay. So this was the welfare initially. We have this. Okay. Now in case of producer surplus also, we can do the same sort of analysis. So this was the original producer surplus, this triangle. If price goes down, then this is the loss in producer surplus. Okay, so again price is changed. So we can see that this part is the change in producer surplus. Okay. Okay, now how do we measure this? Now let marginal cost. So first we are focusing on producer surplus. Remember that marginal cost is the supply curve under perfect competition. So let marginal cost be a continuous function. Okay. And the price is P0. And well, if you go to this MC curve, that means the firm will produce an amount equal to Q0. Okay. So what is the producer surplus? It is the shaded area. So this shaded area can be found that this is the total revenue, right? Which is given by P0 into Q0, this rectangle, and we can subtract this amount. That is the integral of marginal cost from 0 to Q0. So we will get this area. Now, since the marginal cost function is the derivative of the total variable cost function, we can write that 0Q0 MCQ is equal to the total variable cost evaluated at Q0 minus TVC evaluated at 0. Okay. And what is variable cost at 0? Variable cost depends on output. So if output is 0, variable cost will also be 0. So we only have TVC evaluated at Q0. Now, why don't we take fixed cost? Why don't we take fixed cost?
So because that has to be paid irrelevant of whether we are selling or we are not selling.
Okay. Marginal cost is the change in
Fixed
cost due to
costs,
output.
yes. Fixed costs don't affect marginal cost
Yeah.
since they do
They-
not vary with additional units.
Yeah. So if output changes, variable cost will change, but not fixed cost. That is why the integral of marginal cost is the variable cost. Okay, so the producer surplus is simply given by P into Q, which is total revenue. And we can see that this integral part is simply the variable cost evaluated at Q0. Okay, now suppose prices increase from P0 to P hat, then the producer surplus would also increase. Instead of P0 Q0, it will become the total revenue will be P hat into Q hat. You can see over here P hat Q hat, and the integral, the marginal cost portion, should be evaluated from 0 to Q hat. Okay. So we find out the producer surplus in both the cases. Okay. So this minus this will give me the change in producer surplus. Okay. Okay. Now, rather than working through the expression for producer surplus at each of the prices, okay. So this is we have a tedious, if the price changes again, we'll again have to find out the total revenue, subtract the variable cost, and go on doing this. So what we can do is, it is the area to the left of the marginal cost. Okay. From P equal to P0 to P equal to P hat. Okay. So if we take the inverse of this marginal cost, right? Q equal to MC1. So I mean, just rotate this graph. Wait a minute. So what are the axes over here? This is price, this is quantity. what we can do is we can plot it like this. Okay. Right. So what is this area? This area is simply this. Is it clear? So this is the inverse of the marginal cost function. So what we have to do is we have P equal to MCQ. We take the inverse of this. Okay. So now this is the Y which we plot over here. This is the X. And we simply find out the integral as we normally do from P0 to P hat. Okay. Is this clear, everyone? So what I'm saying is that we can measure the change in producer surplus in two ways. We can find out what is the initial producer surplus. Okay, so we find out total revenue, we subtract from the variable cost. Then we find out what is the new producer surplus. So we again find out total revenue, we again subtract variable cost, and then we take the difference. So we take the second difference of the two differences. The alternative is we can simply take the inverse function, if it exists, of course, and then the entire problem becomes very simple. It becomes a problem of just finding out a definite integral. Okay. So for a profit maximizing firm with a marginal cost equal to 2Q plus 1, what is the producer surplus at price equal to 10? So at P equal to 0, the marginal cost is equal to P0. Okay, so this implies that Q0 is 4.5. So we simply find out Q over here. Q0 is 4.5, and then we take this function. So instead of subtracting total revenue and this integral, what we do is we inverse this function, and in that case, we can simply, this becomes the consumer surplus. So here they've taken the total revenue part. So 10 into 45, price into quantity, and this is from 0 to 4.5, 2Q plus 1. So this is Q square plus Q from 0 to 4.5, and this turns out to be, this part is 24.75. So this is the producer surplus. Okay. Okay. Okay, so find out what is the producer surplus for price equal to 50.
So price equal to 15 or
Yes,
50.
1 5. 1 5. I've written it over here.
Oh, okay, sir.
Sir, I'm getting 49.
Yes, sir. 49.
Yes, sir, probably.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, now what I'm saying is the function. Okay, the function is p equal to 2q plus 1. So what is the inverse function of this?
P minus 1 by 2 equal to Q.
Yes, sir. P minus 1 by 2.
Wait a minute. P minus 1 by 2. Or we can write this as p by 2 minus half. Okay. Okay. So let's take the integral from 0 to 15. No, sorry, it won't be 15. Uh, this is, yeah, it will be 15.
Sir, won't it be
Right.
from 1 to 15?
হ্যাঁ, তোমার কিউটা কত হচ্ছে? কিউ যদি 0 হয় তাহলে কত হচ্ছে? It becomes 1. Yes.
1.
এখানে 1 করে দিই। ওকে, তাহলে এইখানে দেখো this is equal, it should be equal to 49. এইটা কত হবে? This will be p and this will be p by 2. Sorry, this is p square, right? আমারই ভুল হয়েছে।
So p square by 4.
এক মিনিট। p square by
P square by 4 হবে
2,
স্যার।
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, এখানে 2টা নিচে নেমে আসবে। হ্যাঁ, আর এইটা তোমার কি হচ্ছে? এটা তো p by 2ই হবে।
Yes, sir.
তাহলে first you have to evaluate it at 15. So this is 225 by 4 minus 15 by
49 আসছে।
আচ্ছা, এটা হয়ে যাচ্ছে 1 by 4 minus half। ঠিক আছে। So hopefully it comes to 49.
Yes, sir, it's coming 49.
Okay. So we can find out, I mean, if the function is simple enough, then we can simply, instead of finding out in this formula, tr minus this, we can simply invert the function and take the integral. Okay. So over here, what they've done is they've taken the function, they've inverted the function, and now we are asking that what is the change in producer surplus when I'm moving from the price, what was the initial price? 10, and it is moving to 15. Okay, so that means, I mean, since you've done all this problem, it's very easy. Initially, the producer surplus was 20.25. Now it is 49. So this means it will be 75. This is 21. It is 28.75. But suppose you're starting from fresh. Okay. So in that case, instead of this complicated way, you could simply have taken the inverse of this, of the marginal cost function. So you have this function, and now the price is from 10 to 15. Okay, so just well, there's no need to check, but I mean, just practice this. You can see that again, in that case, we get 28.75. Now, suppose in this case, what has happened is the price has gone up from 10 to 15. Okay, so the producer surplus increases to by 28.75. But suppose it is the opposite. Price was 15, now it becomes 10. So in that case, we will have, instead of 10 to 15, we will have sorry,
Then
এখানটা উল্টে যাচ্ছে.
yes, so then it will come in negative, right?
It will then become negative. The absolute value will be the same. It is always going to be 28.75. But now you have a negative sign. So as you can see over here, that integral 15 to 10 is the negative of 10 to 15. Okay, this is from these properties. Okay. Now, in the case of consumer surplus, price, what we can simply do is we take the inverse of the demand function. Sorry, we suppose well, I mean, they are writing it in this way because sometimes we write quantity demanded is a function of price. So in that sense, it is the inverse function. And so this is the consumer surplus. So we take the inverse of the function and let us say this is Q0. So it will be the integral from 0 to Q0 f minus 1 dq. So this will give me this area. And what is this area? This is simply price into quantity, the expenditure. Okay. So the first part is the entire area under the demand curve. What is the interpretation of this area? We know that this triangle is the consumer surplus. We know that this is the expenditure, but what is this entire area?
Dead weight loss.
Sir, maximum willingness to pay means that is the reservation price for each quantity we are maximum means that's the maximum I am willing to pay.
There's a very simple way. It's not a dead weight lost. Yeah, you can call it reservation price, but reservation price would mean one thing, one price, right? So reservation price is this. How much? What is the maximum amount you're willing to pay? This for so much quantity. For the second quantity, you're willing to pay this. So the reservation price is varying. You don't have one reservation price. What
So
is
you're
the
asking
basis?
about the rectangle.
No, I'm asking about the rectangle plus the triangle. On what do you base your reservation price?
Sir, preferences.
Think again.
ডিমান্ড
এই ডিমান্ড কার্ভই তো এটা। কার্ডিনাল থিওরির কথা ভাবো না।
The
It is simply,
utility derived from the consumption of the next
yeah,
unit.
total
it is
utility.
simply the total utility. তোমার ডিমান্ড কার্ভটা কি? ডিমান্ড কার্ভটা তো হচ্ছে তোমার মার্জিনাল ইউটিলিটি কার্ভ। Demand is the marginal utility, right? In the Marshallian theory, we write in a one commodity world, marginal utility is equal to lambda p. When L lambda is the constant marginal utility of money. Okay. So if this is the marginal utility, what is the integral?
Total utility.
Total utility. So it is the total utility obtained from consuming Q0. So this is the satisfaction that you get. This is your benefit from consumption. And what is P0 Q0? That is the cost, the amount that you're paying out. So you're making a gain. Your surplus is the triangle. Okay. Now we come to improper integrals. Okay. Improper integrals are of two types. See, so far what we have done is, in case of the definite integrals, it was like this. Right. Now, two things. Both A and B are very specific numbers. And secondly, within this range, the function is continuous. Okay. Improper integral occurs when either of the two function assumptions are or conditions are violated. So instead of A or B, one possibility is that you have an infinity. So the lower limit can be minus infinity. The upper limit can be plus infinity. Okay, so it means something like this. This is or you can have a mixture of both. Okay, so you don't have a range. AB, the assumption is there's a definite range. But in case of the first case, for example, you are saying what is the area of the curve? You start from here and you just go on and on and on. In this case, you end over here, but what is the starting point? And in this case, there's no, third case, there's no starting point, no end. So this is one type of improper integrals. The other type of improper integrals are where the functions are discontinuous at some points in the interval. So instead of a smooth function like this, we have, let us say like this, or like this. I'll just show this. Okay, this is a case of discontinuity. This is a case of the other type of improper integrals. I mean, there are no limits on either side. Okay, so do you understand why integrals are improper? Okay. Now let us first discuss the case when you have an infinite interval of integration. So you have a lower limit, but there's no upper limit. Sometimes you have a situation, think of this like this. You have a decreasing function, and the function is approaching some point C. Okay. This may not always occur. Okay. But if we have a situation like this, that the limit C tends to infinity, then, so basically what we're talking about is it is asymptotic to the x-axis. And there's some limit C. Okay. So in that case, we can simply find out the area from A to C. So it is integral fx part is not a problem. You will get something. The problem is A is also okay, but this is positive infinity. So what do you put over here? This is the first case. In the second case, what do you have? It is like this. This is infinite. This is infinite. This is plus infinity. This is minus infinity. But if you have a limit, then you might as well put it like this. For here, you can see it is sorry. Suppose it is approaching some. This may not be necessarily 0. It can be some point A. So this is the asymptote. Is the first 2 points clear? So suppose you have a curve like this, right? This function is asymptotic to the x-axis. How can you find out the limit of this, the integral of this?
So we will also limit this, like we will take something like limit epsilon naught a tends to minus infinity. Then
Does the limit exist? I have told you that this part over here, it is asymptotic to the x-axis. But have I told you whether it is approaching an asymptote at the lower boundary?
awesome.
Read this part. If this limit exists, in this case, the limit doesn't exist. So you can't find it out. Unless it is asymptotic to the y-axis, at some point, I draw it. Let's say this is the origin, and this is A to C. Okay. Unless it is asymptotic over here, we cannot, so that a limit exists, we cannot apply this rule. To apply this rule, where there's a problem with the, sorry, we cannot apply this rule. Okay. If it is asymptotic, unless it is asymptotic at this portion, we cannot apply this rule. So remember that a limit must exist. Unless the limit exists, it is asymptotic, we cannot apply these rules. And if we have a boundary problem in both the cases, so if the boundary problem in both the cases, the lower bound and the upper bound, we can take it like this: a to 0, limit a tends to minus infinity. So we take it from a to 0. Okay, so this is this part, and plus limit c tends to infinity 0 to c. So I've got too many things. So let's say it's asymptotic over here, and it is asymptotic over here. Okay, this is E and this is C, and it is 0. So that means we find out this, the area under the curve from A to 0, using the second rule. Okay. Then we find out the area to this. 0 to plus infinity. We replace A over here and we replace C over here, the two asymptotes. Okay, so we are applying this rule. We are summing up two areas. This was the interval A to C. So this is 0. A to 0, 0 to C. Okay, got my point? Okay. Now, why do we go for this stuff? Is it really relevant? So we want to find out the consumer surplus for a demand curve with a constant elasticity of demand. Such a demand curve can be written as Q equal to A into P to the power of minus E, epsilon, when epsilon A and epsilon are both positive. Epsilon is the constant elasticity. You can just check it. Take dq by dp and so on. Now, we have to find out, if you want to find out the consumer surplus, we have to take the inverse demand function, price as a function of quantity. So we have done this. Okay. Now the demand curve is such that it will never touch the price or quantity axis. Okay. So this implies that a consumer surplus received at price P equal to P0 is, the point where it is asymptote is P0 to plus infinity and this is the sorry, this is the inverse, this is the original they are taking the original demand function. Okay, so this is a improper integral in this form, a to plus infinity. You have a lower limit but no upper limit. So the consumer surplus is P0 to plus infinity. I've just written this. I don't know why I've written it twice, but anyway. So this is limit p hat tends to infinity. So we assume, so the demand function is asymptotic, asymptotically approaches some price p hat. So we put this p hat over here and we add the limit and then we just take the integral of this, keeping the limit. So limit p hat tends to infinity and the integral of this is this form. We evaluate this at p0 p hat. This is constant, we bring it out, we have p to the power of 1 minus epsilon. Okay, so now we take the limit of p hat tends to infinity, 1 minus epsilon, minus p of 0, 1 minus epsilon. So this becomes 0. So this is the price when demand will fall to 0. and we have this part. Okay. Okay. So let's apply this. I mean, I'm just saying this part, but let's go for an application which will be easier to understand. So we have a demand function with a is 50 and epsilon is 2, and the price is P equal to 10. So what is the consumer surplus? So this is the inverse demand function. Sorry, this is the demand function. Q equal to quantity as a function of price, and the price is 10 and it goes up to infinity. Okay? So this is the limit. P tends to infinity, 10 to P. Okay, so let's forget about this limit part. We simply integrate 50 into P to the power of minus 2. So the 50 will come out and this will be P minus 1. And this is for price equal to 10. Okay, so they have written it in this form. So the 50 is come out, and this, if you have a limit, this is 1 by P. See, if P is 0, then it becomes infinite, and it's not possible to evaluate the integral. But if we say, but if you think about it, what is the price at which quantity will become infinite? The price will be 0. I mean, it tends to 0. So we simply put 0 over here and we get 0.10, which is 50. This is another case where the demand function is, again, it's a constant elasticity. The elasticity is 1. Epsilon is 1. The problem is that once we evaluate this 20 by P, this is log P. Okay, so log P minus log 2. The problem is that log P tends to infinity. Log P does not have a finite value. See, over here, if as we increase P, 1 by P will get smaller and smaller and will approach 0. So limit of P tends to infinity, 1 by P approaches 0. Here, as we go on increasing P, log P will also continue to go on increasing. It does not approach, it does not have any, it increases, but it is not asymptotically increasing. It's just going to go on increasing like this, something like this. See, if it was like this, then there's a limit. Okay. But if it is just going on increasing like this or like this, there are no limits. As you go on increasing P, log P is going to go up, go on increasing indefinitely. it doesn't approach any value. It doesn't have any limiting case. So in this case, as I told you, see, this limit must exist. But here the limit does not exist, and so we cannot find out the consumer surplus in this case. In this case, however, we do have a limit for this part, and therefore this limit is 0, which we are using. Now the second category of improper integral involves computing the integral over a finite boundary when the integrand is discontinuous in the range. Like here, it is discontinuous at some point. For example, the function fx equal to 1 by x is not continuous at x equal to 0. It becomes infinite. So suppose we take the interval 0 to 1. At a starting point, it doesn't have any value. Moreover, if we go to the right hand side limit 1 by x, so as we go on increasing x, what happens? 1 by x
to 0.
Let me just check this. Yeah, actually the limit should not have been, I should not have put the limit over here. That is the problem. So as we are going on, increasing the value of x, the value will fall. It may have a limiting case, so sorry, the limit should not have been there. So what we are seeing is that as we are increasing x, the function will go on decreasing. Okay, so there's no right hand side limit. There's no right hand side boundary. So that means the area is not finitely valued. It will just it's going to go on increasing like this, falling like this. It will never touch the x-axis, and the problem is that at the point 0 it is discontinuous, so we don't have the area. Okay, so we consider two examples. Limit epsilon 0 plus 2 okay, you can drop this. This point is not very relevant. Okay, so these are the functions. Okay. Then we come to the applications of such improper integrals, and one of the applications, I mean, you know the basics of this application, so I'm going to a bit rush through this. So let us consider Suppose your friend offers you two options. He says that, okay, I'll give you 100 rupees now or 100 rupees after 10 years. Which option will you prefer?
100 rupees now.
But it's lockdown. What will you do with it?
I can earn interest.
When you go to the bank, the police will nab you.
Invest in a stock.
No, you're right. Obviously, we will prefer 100 rupees now. But when will you prefer a future payment? Suppose the option is 100 now or a future payment. Or in other words, when will you prefer a future payment of 100 rupees? When instead of giving you now 100 rupees, he says that, okay, I give you less. But how less? If he says that, okay, I'm giving you 10 rupees now and 100 rupees in the future, you will obviously go for the future payment. But if he says that, okay, I'll give you 99 rupees now or 100 rupees in the future after 1 year, will you prefer the 99 or will you prefer the 100?
So
99.
So there's a critical level. Okay.
So like in future, there is no guarantee that the inflation level will be the same. So 100 rupees now would make more sense than 100 rupees in the future if we assume that inflation might increase in future.
Now the question is, what is this X? What we are basically saying is that the present value of a future payment should be less than the actual payment. Okay. What we are seeing by this somewhat complicated statement is that we are receiving a future payment. We don't give it the same weightage as that of a current payment. We reduce the value, we discount it when we compare it with a present payment. So if I'm giving you 100 rupees now, you value this as 100 rupees. But if I say that I'm going to give you 110 rupees in the future, you don't make it 110. You reduce the value so that it becomes comparable with the present payment. And as the future increases, that is, instead of 1 year, I say that I'll pay you 2 years, I pay you 3 years, the more we reduce the value. Will you agree? Will you agree with this?
So could you repeat once more? I got disconnected in between.
Okay, so what I'm saying is that if I pay you, if I promise you 110 in the future after 1 year, you will, if you want to compare it with a current payment of 100 rupees, you will not say 100 and 110. Will you? In that case, 110 should win. You
So
will
we see
reduce.
the rate of interest.
You will read. Yeah, I'm coming to it. I'm coming to the reasons. You will reduce the value of the future payment. Technically, we say we discount the value of the future payment. And as we increase the future, so instead of 1 year, I say that I'll pay the 110 rupees after 2 years. You reduce the value, you discount by a greater margin. Agreed? So as the future increases, the more and more you discount. Now, why do you discount? One is, as you have rightly said, inflation. Lockdown? but I now need the money to go about town and enjoy myself. So I won't pay you the 120 rupees or whatever we agreed upon. At the moment, let us ignore inflation. Let us also ignore uncertainty. I may die also, I may fall ill, whatever. You may also kick the bucket or whatever. Let us ignore both uncertainty and inflation. Suppose price level is there and we know that I'm going to pay you the money and you will also be there to receive the money. In that case, again, it is because the money can be invested. That is why we prefer the current payment. So suppose the bank rate is R. So after 1 year, we will get 100 plus R into 100 or 100 into 1 plus R, right? So if I pay you 100 rupees now, you could have invested this and got, after 1 year, you would have got 100 into 1 plus R. Right? So, if I want to make you an equivalent payment in the future, so that you're indifferent, how much should I pay you? I should pay you 100 into 1 plus R. Okay. Now the reverse of this, suppose you have already made the calculations and you want to make me into a Buridan's ass. So you find out that 100 into, you say that, okay, I can give you 100 rupees now or 100 into 1 plus R. So this future payment, it is more than 100, but what is the present value? The present equivalent of this is 100. Okay. The future value of 100 is 100, 1 plus R. So do you understand the difference between the present value and the future value? How we are calculating?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that means I'm getting 100 now. If you want to pay me an equivalent value in the future, what is it? The present value of that amount should be also 100. I can also think of it that I've got 100 in the present. So the equivalent value of this in the future is I convert this 100 into an equivalent value in the future. Okay, so basically we are indifferent between a future payment of 100 into 1 plus R and a current payment of 100. If the current payment is less than 100, we are going to prefer the future payment. But if we get a current payment greater than 100, then we would prefer to get the money now. Okay, so to calculate the present value, okay, the present value of X is 100, 1 plus R is 100, we know this. Because we are if I get 100, after 1 year, this will become 100, 1 plus R. So, the in present value terms, this 100, 1 plus R, we define this as amount divided by 1 plus R after 1 year. Okay. R is the rate of interest. Now suppose the payment is made after 10 years or after T years. In that case, it will be X divided by 1 plus R T. Okay. So what is the present value of rupees 200 after 1 year? 200, 1, the rate of interest is 10%, so 0.10. So it is 181.8. So 200 looks very appetizing, but actually it means that it is equal to 181 or 182 rupees in the future. Sorry. Yeah. So it means that if I pay you 181 rupees, 181.80 rupees now, this is equal to 200 rupees in the future. If I give you 200 rupees after 2 years, you should discount it even more. You should increase the denominator. Make this power, instead of 1, make it 2. So you can find this out. Now, in the case of bonds, government bonds, the consumers purchase the bond. As you know, there's a coupon price and the coupon rate of interest. The price and rate which is written in the coupon. These are the issue prices. Let us say the issue price is 1,000 and the rate of interest is 10%. And the bond is issued for 10 years. So that means the person who has purchased the bond will get an amount of rupees 100, which is 10% of 1,000 rupees every year for the next 10 years. After a lapse of 10 years, he gets back his 1,000 rupees from the government. Okay? So the inflation rate is 15%. So that means the real value will be M by P. Now, apparently it will mean that you're getting 100 rupees every 10 years, and in the last year you get back 100 plus the original 1,000, the face value of the bond. But if you take the present value, okay, see, in the first year you have paid 1,000. Are you making, should you invest in the bond or not? And this is 1 plus 0.15. Now you square this, you cube this and go on till it becomes 10. In the last year you get 1,100. So you find out the present value. Okay. If the present value is 0, you're indifferent between holding the money or investing in the bond. If the present value is positive, you will invest in the bond. If the present value is negative, you will hold the money and not purchase the bond. So this is how much you're paying. So you're giving away the money to the government in the first period. That is why it is negative. Then in the 10 years, you're getting back a lot of money. But remember that it has to be, you're getting this in the future. So it has to be discounted. The value is not 100. The value of money has gone down. So that is, you have to adjust it for inflation. Okay. So in this case, the time was discrete. So that means you had one period like this. Okay, so for 10 years, it was a concrete period like this. So you could use summation. And the present value is given by summation 0 to 10, 100 divided by 1 plus R T. Okay. Okay. Okay, so this is over here. I discussed the inverse relation between price of bond and interest rate, which you already know. Now let us consider a perpetual bond, which is never redeemed. So there's an issue price of 1,000 and you pay 10%, you get 10% interest. And in case of consoles, the stream of payment is infinite. So it just goes on and on and on like this. Okay. So in a discrete, if the payment in discrete time, you could say infinite t equal to 0 to capital T, when the capital T tends to infinity, 100 1 plus R T. But if time is assumed to be continuous, then you cannot use sigma, summation. You have to use integration. So this is a improper integral. That is the annual payments. The assumption in this discrete model is that you get the interest at the end of the year, or the end. In this case, it is the end of the year. In the continuous case, the assumption is that you get interest every, the interest payment is spread uniformly over the year instead of a single annual lump sum payment. So in that case, you have limit 0 to infinite. This is infinity. So using the rules of improper integrals, if we assume that t tends to infinity, capital T tends to infinity, the integral should be evaluated from 0 to this t. And over here, we have found out this value. It's d by r. So this is why we use this is the basis for the inverse relation between bond price and interest rate. So the rectangles in each area, if you're taking the discrete case, you're taking these rectangles. Okay. But if you're going for the continuous case, it is the area under the curve. So you're also including the shaded area. And this will be the integral. So this is the present value of the total payment. So I've given you a problem over here, which you can try to solve. Okay. And finally, this is the case when you have a single point of discontinuity within the closed interval a to c. So if fx is continuous at every point a to c except at the end point. See, the discontinuity can occur at 3 points, either at the starting point, at the end point, or in the middle. So if it occurs at the end point, then so that means it's at a starting point. Okay, sorry. The end point. Okay, I've always I've written this. Let's see if I can correct this. No, sorry, I've written this as a picture. So actually, I tried copy pasting this, and so this was the mistake. So this should be. Let's see. Correct this. It should be at a starting point. Okay, so we have a closed interval at C, but an open interval at A. So we can write limit epsilon tends to 0. It's approaching 0 from the side. And the integral is A plus epsilon. Okay, so if this, but this limit again has to exist. If the function is discontinuous at the end, it becomes a semi-open interval. It's closed at the starting point, open at the end. So now we are going to, instead of plus epsilon, we are going to have C minus epsilon if the limit exists. And if it is continuous at every point in the closed interval except for an interior point, then we simply divide this up. We use B as the boundary. So it becomes A to B minus C using this rule, and using this rule it becomes B plus C to C. So it's like this. So this is the case. You have a discontinuity, but it is like this. So here it is discontinuous over here. Just a minute. এক মিনিট কোথা থেকে কোথা থেকে হ্যাঁ করতে পারে হ্যাঁ করো So this is, if you have a discontinuity over here, what we do is we simply take the interval like this, we evaluate this using the second rule, we evaluate this using the first rule, and we simply sum it up. So that's the end of integral calculus. So I'll change the slide and send it to you later on. If you have any problem, I'm afraid I can't give you time. We have a workshop from 7, so we have to set up everything. But we can discuss any problem in the next class.
Sir, would you upload the recording?